Welcome to Game Fondue Reviews. In this video, we're going to take a look at Cosmic Encounter. In Cosmic Encounter, players are taking on the role of alien races competing to expand their galactic empires. Let's jump right in with the description of the rules, see a few example turns being played, then I'll be back for some closing remarks. This is Cosmic Encounter, set up for a 3-player game. To set up, you're going to put the warp in the center of the play area. Then each player is going to pick a color, take all ships and planets in that color. They're going to put a stack of 4 ships on each planet to form a colony there. They're going to put their colony marker on the 0 space of the score track. Next, you're going to shuffle up the flare cards and deal 2 to each player. They're going to take the corresponding alien sheets that match the names on the flare cards. All players are going to secretly pick one, put it face down in front of them. Once everybody has picked one of their alien sheets, they're all flipped face up like so. Also, I want to point out, before you deal out the flare cards, there's 2 versions of the filch card, which you can see here. You're only going to include one version shuffled into that deck that you deal out, so the other one will be put aside at that time. Also, it's important to note there are 3 different levels of aliens. There's green, yellow, and red. Green are recommended for beginners, while red is for expert players. For simplicity's sake, we've only included green aliens in this example game. After that, you're going to shuffle all the flare cards you dealt out to the players, even the ones they did not select, into the deck. If you're playing with fewer than 5 players, you're also going to shuffle in additional random flare cards until you get the total to 10. So for instance, we gave each of these players 2 cards, so that's 6. So we're going to shuffle in 4 random more flare cards into this deck here. Once the deck is made, you're going to deal out 8 cards to each player. That's going to form their hand. Aside from that, you're just going to remove any cards from the Destiny deck that do not match player colors in the game. For instance, we removed all the green and purple cards because we don't have a green and purple player. You're just going to shuffle this deck and form a face-down stack. Now you're ready to start the game. During the game, players take turns in clockwise order, performing 1 or 2 encounters, depending if they're successful or not on the first, composed of 7 phases. The 7 phases of an encounter are Regroup, Destiny, Launch, Alliance, Planning, Reveal, and Resolution. The game ends when one or more players has 5 foreign colonies. A colony is any planet that you have at least 1 ship on. So for instance, you start the game with 5 home colonies. A foreign colony is any colony that's not on one of your home planets. At that time, whoever has 5 or more foreign colonies wins the game. It's possible multiple players win the game at the same time. Prior to the first regroup phase of a turn, a player is going to take their hand. They're going to look at it to see if they have any encounter cards. An encounter card is an attack card, a negotiate card, or a morph card, which we'll get into later. We can see here this player does have at least 1, so nothing happens at this time. But if the player checks and they have no encounter cards in their hand, they must discard their whole hand and draw a new hand of 8 cards. Next, if the active player has 1 or more ships in the warp, they may take back 1. So for instance, this guy has a whole bunch of ships here. He could take back 1 and put on any of his colonies. It doesn't have to be the one that it was on originally. In the event a player has no colonies, they're just going to take the 1 guy back and put him right on the hyperspace gate. In the Destiny phase, if there's 2 or more cards left in the Destiny deck, you're just going to reveal the top card and resolve it. If there's only 1 card left, you're going to shuffle the discards together to form a new stack, and then you're going to resolve the top card of the deck. If the Destiny card drawn is a color and it's not your color, so for instance if the blue player drew red or yellow, he's going to take the hyperspace gate and he's going to aim it at any of the planets in the corresponding color. So if he drew the red, he's going to pick one of the planets in the red to aim at. That's what he's going to be attacking this turn. Once the targeted planet has been selected, the active player is going to take 1 to 4 of their own ships from any of their colonies, not from the warp, and put them on the hyperspace gate. They can come from the same place or different places, but if you take all of the guys from one space, meaning there's no colony left there, you have lost that colony, so you can never return there until you conquer it later. Alternatively, if you draw your own color, so for instance, the red player's turn and he draws the red card, he can either target an enemy colony on one of his own planets, like so, or he can just discard the card and draw again until he gets a different card from his own color. If you do choose to target an enemy on one of your own planets, you still place 1 to 4 guys from anywhere on the hyperspace gate. There is one additional possibility if you draw your own color card, and that's if you have a totally empty planet. So if this was the situation, there's no enemies, no your guys at your own colony, you can just target that planet and you would immediately conquer it with whatever guys you decided to put on the hyperspace gate. You do not have to resolve the rest of the turn. If instead of a color you draw a wild, you can pick any other player, and you're going to point at one of their areas and you're going to attack them. So for instance, even if there was some yellow guys on this planet here, if you choose this planet, you would have to be attacking the blue guy in his home system with your wild card. And the final type of Destiny card is a special card, and it's going to give you the instructions for who to attack. For instance, this one you attack the other player with the most foreign colonies, and that follows the same rule as Wild. You're going to have to attack that player in his own home colonies. From this point on, the active player is referred to as the offense on most card abilities, and the other player will be referred to as the defense. But both the offense and the defense will be referred to as main players on various card abilities as well. The only other thing to note here is if you're attacking the blue guy in his own system and there's a yellow guy sitting on the planet as well, these guys are just bystanders. They're not being attacked at all. Also, I want to point out if a planet is totally empty, so for instance you're attacking the blue guy here, because remember, you can't attack the yellow and the blue planets, he still has to defend it, though he has a strength of 0. In the alliance phase, first the offense is going to have the opportunity to invite other players to join his alliance, and then the defense. So let's pretend we're in a battle here with red having a strength of 3 against the blue guys on his home planet here with the strength of 3 as well. So red can first say if he wants the yellow player to be his ally or not. Remember, in a bigger game, there's more people to choose from, and then blue's going to have an opportunity to say who he would like to be his ally. He can say the same people red said, or he can say nobody. But only players who are invited by a player can potentially become allies of that player. So in our example, let's say both the red player and the blue player ask the yellow player to ally with them. So the yellow player is going to have to choose who he wants to ally with. Again, he could choose either of them, but only one. He cannot ally with both sides. It's also possible for him to decline and not ally with either of them. Also, with more players, the allies will always resolve in clockwise order from the offense. So the offense would be here. So the yellow player would first decide who he's going to ally with, then another player over here, and so on if there's more than 3 players. If a player chooses to ally with the offense, they're going to take 1 to 4 ships from anywhere. It can be the same place or different, not the warp, however, and put them right on the hyperspace gate. If they choose to ally with the defense, they're going to take 1 to 4 ships from anywhere and put them next to the planet. They do not get to go on the planet, but they will go in front of it to guard them. It's also important to note if there's multiple players, like in a 4 or 5 player game, this player is going to commit his ships before the next player decides whether or not they're going to ally with either side. So next, the offense and defense are both going to play 1 encounter card at the same time, face down from their hands in front of them. If the defense does not have an encounter card, he's going to reveal his hand, discard all the cards, and draw a new hand of 8 cards until he gets one. The offense, however, if the offense does not have an encounter card, the turn immediately ends and the attack does not happen. But there's a few different types of encounter cards. Those are attack cards, negotiate cards, and the morph card. In all cases, you're going to reveal both cards at the same time, and if both players played an attack, you're going to determine the value of each side by adding up the value of the attack card, in this case 11, plus the number of ships in the hyperspace gate, both the offense and any allies. He has no allies, so it would just be 11 plus 3, so his strength is 14, and the defense works the same way. It's going to be him plus his defensive allies, so that's 3, 4, 5. Remember, any bystanders on the planet do not count, plus the value of the card itself. Also, defense will win ties, and at this time, after the cards are revealed, both sides, allies and defenders and offense, can just throw in reinforcement cards to add to the attack power of their group. This is very free form. You don't do it in any type of turn order, and one player can throw a whole bunch of them or any number that they would like to. Whoever has the highest attack power, again, defense wins ties, is going to be victorious. We'll explain how to resolve victories and defeats in the next phase, which is the resolution phase. But the next possible situation is one player plays an attack and one player plays a negotiate. In this case, the player who plays an attack automatically wins. The negotiating player is defeated. The next possibility is both players play a negotiate card. If that happens, they have 1 minute to negotiate. Also, all allies are going to be immediately returned to their home colonies. So this yellow guy would come back and he can go anywhere. They don't have to go to the same places, but any colonies he owns in the world. They could even go here, for instance. But these players are going to get 1 minute. You got to time them to negotiate a treaty. In a treaty, there are a few things that can be traded. It can be cards from your hand or a colony on any planet where you have a colony. So for instance, this red player may give this blue player 3 cards from his hand, and this blue player can form a colony over here where red has one. You can only trade 1 colony. You can't give a guy a whole bunch of colonies, but something has to exchange hands for this negotiation to be considered successful in 1 minute. The final possibility is one player reveals the morph card. There's only 1 morph card, but what it does is it exact copies the other card. So in this case, they would both be negotiating. In this case, they both would have played an attack card of value 6. So after you determine who wins or loses the conflict, the resolution phase occurs. So in the first example where both players played an attack card, and this guy had a higher total because he had 11 plus 3 is 14, and this guy had 3 plus 2 is 5 plus 6 is 11, so 14 is greater. If the offense wins, all offense and offensive allies are going to get to colonize this planet. In that case, the first thing that will happen is all the defense and defensive allies, not the bystanders, are going to be sent to the warp. They are defeated at this time, and all of the offense guys and offensive allies are going to go ahead and place their guys right on that planet. They now have a colony, and they're going to move up. If they already had a colony there, for instance, if Red already had a colony here, he's not going to gain another foreign colony along the score track, but he would just put his guys in that colony. So in the example, let's pretend Yellow was an offensive ally. He would just go ahead and recruit more guys to that colony there. If the defense was victorious, however, all of the offensive players and offensive allies instead would be sent to the warp, and any defensive players would just remain where they are. Any defensive allies do not get to come onto the colony. They're just going to be sent back to where they're from, but they are going to get some benefits at this time. So for each ship a defensive ally supplied, in this case it was 2, because remember he sent 2 guys here to protect, he could take 1 guy back from the warp or draw 1 card. But this is only if he's victorious. If the defense loses, he just goes to the warp here. Also want to point out, in the event that the defense played a negotiate and the offense played an attack, or vice versa, everybody is going to be defeated as normal, except the defeated will get to draw cards from the victor, equal to the number of ships they lost to the warp, not counting allies. So for instance, in this case, this guy would have lost 3 ships, even though he would have also lost 2 allies. He'll get to draw 3 cards from the offense's hand. If, however, both sides decide to negotiate, all allies are just ignored. So, for instance, we had these allies here. They're just going to return to their home planets wherever they'd like. They have no bearing on the negotiation. So if negotiation succeeds, meaning something changes hands, either a colony or cards, it's considered a successful negotiation, which we'll explain what that means in a second. Alternatively, both sides are going to lose any 3 guys to the warp. So, for instance, if red and blue couldn't agree within the time limit of 1 minute, both of them immediately lose 3 guys to the center here. They don't have to be from the hyperspace gate and the targeted planet. They can be from anywhere. After the resolution, the encounter concludes, and at that time, any played cards are just going to be discarded. If the encounter was successful, meaning the offense won an attack, or they negotiated successfully with the defense, and it was their first encounter of their turn, they may take a second encounter. You can never take a third encounter, though. If it's your second, your turn is just done, and play will proceed left. Also, play will always proceed left if you lost an attack or failed to negotiate in a certain amount of time. It's also important to note if you're the active player and you were successful in your first encounter, but you have no encounter cards left in your hand, you can no longer discard to draw back up like you could at the very beginning of your turn. So your turn will also end in that case. Before moving on to the example playthrough, there's a few more things I want to cover. The first is alien powers, and everybody will have a special power that breaks the rules of the game. And they can use them at any time as long as they have at least 3 of their home planets. And what I mean by that is they must have colonies on 3 different of their home planets. So for instance, in this case, blue only has colonies on 2 home planets. He'd have to flip this down. He's lost his alien power, but he will get it back if he gets a colony on a 1/3 of his home planets again. The next thing I want to cover is Artifact, Cosmic Zap, and Flare cards. And Artifact cards can be played as indicated. In this case, it's played when somebody else makes a successful deal, and it just cancels that deal. After you play an Artifact card, it's just discarded that time. A specific type of Artifact card is a Cosmic Zap, and you can use that to cancel the use of somebody else's power. But it's important to note that some powers are passive, so you can't cancel their use, and even portions of some powers are passive. Only parts of powers that actually say the word used on it. Flare cards work a little bit differently in that after you play them, you get them back to your hand. You have to use the top part of the flare unless the name of the flare matches your creature. So for instance, if you are the filch, you must use the bottom half of the card, but otherwise you're going to use the top. You're just going to play that, resolve it, and take it back to your hand. But you can only play 1 flare card per encounter. So the game ends immediately when 1 or more players reach 5 foreign colonies. Remember, home colonies do not count as foreign colonies for purposes of scoring. And at that point, all players that have 5 or more win the game. Before getting into the example playthrough, we're going to briefly go over the technology variant included in the base game. We're not going to be using it here, but I want to give the basic understanding of how it works. So at the beginning of the game, you're going to deal each player 2 technology cards. They're going to look at them, and they're going to keep 1. Whichever one they keep, they're going to put face down in front of themselves, and they've added a new step to the beginning of their turn. The way that works is prior to the regroup phase of a player's turn, they can either research or complete a tech card. To research it, you're going to put 1 guy on it. Remember, you cannot research and complete it at the same turn. But when you choose to complete it, you're going to flip it face up. If you have guys equal to its science value, you're going to have it in play now, and it's going to work for you. If you have less guys, in our case, we flipped it up when only in 1, you're just going to abandon it and discard it. But you get your guy back at that time. Once you put a guy on it, it can never be removed unless by a character ability. And lastly, the way to get more technology cards is if a player wins their first encounter, meaning they're eligible for a second, they can forego their second encounter. They don't go on their second encounter, and then they can draw more technology cards. When they do this, they draw as many technology cards as they have foreign colonies plus 1. So if the red player did not go on his second expedition, even though he could, he would draw 3 colony cards. But again, you're only going to keep 1. You can have any number of technology cards face down in front of you. It doesn't matter, but you can only research 1 or complete 1 per turn. Let's go into this example playthrough. We shuffled up the flare cards and dealt 2 to each player. These guys have already chosen their aliens. But we can see here this guy got a Vulcan and an Oracle, so he took the corresponding sheets and he has to make his decision. He decided to pick the Oracle, so he's going to put that in front of him, and now everybody can flip up what they've selected. The Vulcan is just not going to be used in the game, but his flare card is. All the flare cards that were dealt out just get shuffled into the deck, along with a few more flare cards that bring it up to 10. Because remember, we're only 3 players, so there's only 6, so we're going to add 4 more in at random. Now we're going to deal out 8 cards to each player. We're going to start the game. We're going to jump ahead to that point. Welcome back. We dealt with the cards and now we're ready to start the game. We're going to have the pacifist go first. So the first thing he's going to do is check if there's any encounter cards in his hand. He does have at least 1 encounter card, so we know we're going to move on to the next phase. For regroup, there's no guys to take back because he has no guys defeated yet. So he's going to move right on to Destiny. He's going to flip the card, and he got blue. So he knows he's going to have to fight the blue guy in the blue area. So he's going to take the gate. And he's going to point it at this one right next to him. So then he's going to put any number of guys from 1 to 4 from different places or from the same place. He decides he's going to go ahead and put 3. He'd really like to get this colony. His special ability, just to point out, is he wins if he plays a negotiate and the other guy plays an attack card, which is against the normal rules. He's feeling pretty good because he has this negotiate card in his hand. Now, both the offense and the defense have opportunities to say who they'd like to be their ally.
the offense goes first. He'd like to ally with the zombie here. If there was more players, he'd like to ally with them too. You can ally with any number of players. Both of them say, you know what, we'll both ally with the zombie. So now it's the zombie's choice if he wants to ally with one of them, both of them, or neither of them. He, of course, decides he wants to ally with the pacifist because he thinks he's going to get an easy win here because the pacifist can just play the negotiate card. So he's going to go ahead and throw one guy out onto that hyperspace gate. So now both the offense and the defense are going to put a card face down at the same time, but the Oracle is going to use his power, which allows him to see what card the other guy has played face down before he chooses his. So he finds out that the pacifist, of course, did play the negotiate card. If he had a negotiate card as well, he would play it, but he doesn't. So he's just going to throw this attack of power 1 face down. So now both players reveal their cards at the same time, and now normally the attack would defeat the negotiate, but he's going to use his power. That means if somebody has a cosmic zap, they could prevent him from doing so, but no one has one at this point. No one wants to use it. So anyway, this guy is defeated. And these guys are going to be victorious. So all these cards are discarded to the discard pile, and these guys are totally wiped out here. So everybody comes in, and both yellow and red pick up a free foreign colony, while blue's still far behind. Also, because that was red's first mission this turn, and it was successful, he can go ahead and take his second one as long as he has at least one encounter card in his hand. Remember, you can't discard it this time. He does have at least one encounter card, so he's going to go ahead and go for that second one. As usual, during the regroup phase, he could take one guy back from the warp, but he doesn't have any in the warp, so he's just going to go ahead and flip that destiny card, and he's going to attack the opponent with the most foreign colonies, so we know it's going to be yellow. With that, we're going to jump ahead a little bit later in the game, so you can see some more interesting situations. Welcome back. We progressed a bit in the game. Now all players have 3 foreign colonies, as you can see here. It's the red player's turn. He decided to attack this yellow planet with nobody on it. Remember, these bystanders don't count as anything, so yellow has a defending strength of 0, but he offered for blue to ally with him, and blue decided he would, and he supplied 4 guys right here in front of the planet. Now, normally they would each put a card face down, even though yellow has no guys here. But first, blue is going to play this card, and it's a flare card, and it's going to make them switch powers. Also, no, yellow has no power because he has less than 3 home planets at this time. So they've now switched powers. Normally, flare cards would return to your hand, but this one says if the sorcerer's not in play, you discard it. So now this guy can no longer win by playing negotiates, so he's going to have to play something else. He decides to put this card face down, while yellow decides to put this card face down. So they both have a card face down. They're going to reveal it at the same time. So far the strength here is 20 plus 1 is 21, and the strength here is 12 plus 4 plus 0, so 16. But he's going to add some to it. He's going to make it 19 with the reinforcement. He's going to make it 21 with a reinforcement, because remember, defense wins ties, so right now they're winning. However, this guy's going to throw a reinforcement to make that plus 5. Unfortunately for the defense, they're overpowered, so all these guys are wiped out here to the warp. Remember, if he was successful in defending, he would get to draw 4 cards, or take 4 guys back from the warp, or any combination thereof. For instance, he could draw 2 cards and take 2 guys back from the warp. But for now, these guys are defeated. This guy stays where he is, but this guy has claimed another area, so he's going to move up here. And that was his first counter this turn, so he can take another one. All these cards are discarded, and we're going to continue with the game. We'll come back at the final situation, so you can see what the end of the game looks like. We're now at the end of the game. The yellow player is attacking the red player here, and each player has 4 foreign colonies. So if he's victorious, he is going to win despite not having a power. Unfortunately for red, he only has 1 card, so that's the one he's going to put face down. Also, blue is helping as an ally, but he has no cards in hand. This guy's going to put this down, so they're going to reveal. And attack cards always beat negotiates regardless of the value, so we know that yellow is going to be victorious at this time. These guys are all going to be defeated, so he's going to move up here. I do want to point out, though, that normally if you play a negotiate and the other guy plays an attack, you get to steal cards from their hand equal to the number of guys you lost. So in a normal situation, he would get to take 4 cards from his opponent's hand at this time. But the game is now over, and the yellow player is victorious.
Despite the example playthrough, I would not play Cosmic Encounter with 3 players. In fact, I would recommend it with 5 or more, because Cosmic Encounter is a game of chaos and politics, and you really lose a lot of that with a smaller player count. The game itself is just fun. You're an alien race, and you're trying to conquer the universe. You're just having a good time. There's not a lot of strategy in the game or anything like that. There's a lot of randomness with the cards, and other expansions add even more randomness and just kookiness to the game. But kind of that's the fun of it. It's also a game that I found goes over really well with new players, because they can look at the board and the game and immediately understand what they're supposed to do. There's planets out there. They're going to go conquer them. They're an alien race. They have this power. It's really easy to get into. You can have a lot of fun with it. It's also fun to make and break alliances with other people, and it's just a game that there's not a lot to really think about when you're playing it, so it works really well with new crowds. Also, there's many expansions for the game, a lot of which add another player. I think the more players in Cosmic Encounter, the better, the crazier it gets, and that's exactly what it's supposed to do. But there's also one that adds a rewards deck to sort of give an extra benefit to somebody for allying with somebody on the defensive side, which I think is worth taking a look at, because there's not a lot of reason to ally with somebody in the defensive in this game unless somebody's near the end or close to winning, things like that. But this might not go over that well with more serious Euro gamers. I've found people that are, really calculated players that don't like this so much because it's just kind of wild. But it's just a fun gaming experience for everybody else. So if it looked neat to you, check it out. That's Cosmic Encounter.